The dying suns of the galaxy cast their final flickers of light over endless starfields, a somber testament to an age fading into shadow. Once, these stars had burned bright, heralding an empire unmatched in power and ambition, the Imperium of man, forged in fire and tempered by war. But now, their light wavered like fragile hopes against a void that sought to swallow all existence. It is here, in this twilight of worlds, that our story begins. The tragic rise and fall of Horus Lupercal, the favoured son turned betrayer, a legend ensnared in the cruel weave of fate. Before we journey deeper, know this: you are valued, your presence more than a fleeting moment in the endless cosmos. Where in the vast expanse of this world do you watch from? And what time graces your skies? Take a moment, hold your coffee close, and prepare to walk with me through the shadows of a galaxy torn apart. The Imperium, sprawling across countless star systems, was a monument to human will, an edifice of unyielding order amid the chaos of the cosmos. Yet beneath its shining armor, fractures grew. War surged on every front. Alien incursions, internal rebellions, and the ever-present threat of the warp, an intangible storm of psychic fury that tore at reality's fragile seams. At the heart of this vast, crumbling empire stood Horus Lupercal, war master and greatest of the Emperor's primarchs. Clad in gleaming ceramite armor etched with laurels of victory, he bore the mantle of leadership with a charisma that could rally legions and inspire gods. Yet beneath the veneer of strength, a tempest roiled within him, questions and doubts that no battlefield glory could silence. Immortality, granted through ancient rites of Catan and biotransference, tethered Horus to a fate beyond mortal reckoning. He was more than a man. He was a symbol, eternal yet burdened by time's slow, relentless erosion. To live beyond the span of civilizations was to witness the endless cycle of rise and decay, to carry memories of friends turned foes, and to bear the weight of endless expectation. It was this burden that gnawed at him as whispers of discontent stirred among the ranks. Loyalties once ironclad showed cracks. Shadows moved where light once reigned. The seeds of betrayal, planted by envy and fear, sprouted silently in the dark. Horus's first true conflict was not against alien hordes or heretical cults, but the quiet fracture within his own soul, the doubt that perhaps his path was not that of salvation but destruction. He remembered vividly the moment the traitors revealed themselves, not with the clash of blades, but with the cold sting of whispered lies and shattered trust. Allies turned to adversaries, sworn brothers now enemies, their faces masks of deceit. Each betrayal carved deeper wounds, shaping Horus into a leader who understood that to command was to be forever isolated, perched precariously between devotion and damnation. The galaxy itself seemed to echo his internal torment. Stars dimmed and died, worlds crumbled under the weight of war, and the relentless storm of the warp threatened to engulf all. As the heavens bled their light, Horus stood at a crossroads, not just of battle, but of soul and purpose. Was he the Emperor's true heir, the bringer of humanity's glory, or the architect of its doom? This question haunted him like a ghost on the wind, whispering of choices yet made and consequences unfathomed. The Imperium's fate hung in the balance, poised on the edge of his decision. The stage was set, the die cast, and the saga of Horus Lupercal was about to unfold, where glory and tragedy would intertwine, and the fate of billions would be sealed by the heart of a single man. The corridors of the Imperial Palace echoed with silent whispers, shadows stretching long under the cold, unyielding light of 1,000 hololiths. Within these hallowed halls, where history itself was etched in adamantium and plasma, Horus Lupercal found himself burdened not only by the weight of command, but by the fragile threads of loyalty that bound him to his closest allies. Here, the seeds of doubt had begun to sprout, intertwining with his ambition and threatening to unravel everything he had fought to build. Beside him stood his most trusted companion, Erebus, a warrior cloaked in the darkest secrets of the Word-Bearer's Legion. Erebus was a master of subtlety, weaving doctrines of faith and devotion with a quiet yet unsettling fervor. Their bond had once been forged in the fires of countless battles, but now it felt strained, as if an unseen force tugged at the strands that held them together. Horus sensed the shifting tides beneath Erebus's calm facade, a restlessness that mirrored his own inner turmoil. The galaxy beyond the palace walls was a tempest of chaos and conflict. The Great Crusade pressed on, legions spreading the Emperor's vision of unity across the stars. Yet, even as worlds were conquered and brought under Imperial rule, not all welcomed the coming of the Primarchs. In the shadows of newly claimed systems, whispers of rebellion and heresy flickered like dying embers, threatening to ignite a conflagration that could consume everything. Horus wrestled with a gnawing question that had begun to consume his thoughts. Could absolute loyalty exist in a universe so vast and cruel? The bonds forged in war were tested by ambition and fear, and even the strongest warriors concealed doubts beneath their armor. Erebus, with his cryptic words and subtle manipulations, planted ideas that festered in Horus's mind, ideas of destiny, of mankind's true purpose, and the cost of blind obedience. Amidst the grandeur of the Imperium's might, Horus felt the cold sting of isolation. His brothers, the other Primarchs, each carried their own burdens and ambitions, and the web of alliances and rivalries grew ever more complex. Some looked upon him with envy, others with suspicion. The very loyalty he commanded became a fragile illusion, a mask worn to hide the fractures beneath. One night, beneath the pale light of a dying moon on the forge world of Metallum, Horus met with Erebus in secret. Their conversation was a delicate dance of words, veiled threats and hidden meanings that spoke of truths too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Erebus spoke of the Emperor's will, not as a benevolent guide, but as a chain that bound humanity to stagnation, denying it its true potential. The path to salvation, Erebus murmured, is not through subjugation, but through liberation, even if that liberation demands sacrifice. Horus listened, the seeds of doubt taking root deeper within his soul. Could the Emperor, his father and creator, be a tyrant cloaked in the guise of light? Was the future he envisioned truly the future humanity deserved? These questions haunted him, warping his dreams and clouding his judgment. The line between loyalty and rebellion blurred, and Horus found himself walking a path where every step could lead to salvation or ruin. As the shadows lengthened and the stars outside flickered in silent witness, Horus's internal struggle deepened. The galaxy awaited his next move, unaware that the fate of billions would hinge on the choices born from these quiet moments of doubt and despair. The Empire stood on the brink, not just of external war, but of a betrayal that would echo through the ages. The relentless hum of machinery filled the war chamber aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Horus's flagship, a towering bastion of ceramite and ancient war relics drifting through the black sea of stars. Outside, the void was an endless abyss, a mirror to the storm gathering within the War Master's heart. Every mission, every conquest weighed heavier now, not from the scars of battle, but from the invisible wounds inflicted by doubt and betrayal. Horus paced the length of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the hololithic projection of the galaxy. Planets and star systems shimmered like jewels, each one a prize claimed in the name of the Emperor. And yet, beneath that glittering facade lay unrest, like cracks in a polished shield. His eyes lingered on a single system in the segmentum obscurus, a cluster racked by rebellion and heretical uprisings. The Imperium's grip was faltering there, and the rebellion's fire threatened to spread like wildfire. Beside him, Captain Gaviel Loken, loyal to the core, watched with a mixture of respect and concern. Loken was a paragon of honor, embodying the ideals the Imperium sought to protect. Yet even his steadfastness could not mask the worry etched into his brow. He had noticed the change in Horus, the flicker of shadow beneath his noble gaze. "War Master," Loken began cautiously, "these uprisings, they grow in number. The Emperor's light flickers on the edge of darkness." Horus turned, his voice calm but heavy. "The galaxy bleeds, Gaviel, and we are the surgeons who must cut out the rot before it consumes all." Yet even as he spoke, his mind churned. Was he truly the healer or the executioner? The question gnawed at him relentlessly. The conversation drifted to the Primarchs, his brothers, each a titan of war and ambition. Some remained unwavering in their loyalty to the Emperor's vision. Others, he suspected, harbored their own secrets. Horus had long wondered if the seeds of rebellion were sown not just by external enemies, but from within the bloodline itself. That night, alone in his quarters, Horus faced his reflection in the polished surface of his helm. The face that stared back was both familiar and alien. The favored sun, twisted by shadows of doubt and destiny. His thoughts turned inward, where whispers of betrayal grew louder, fed by memories of Erebus's words and the furtive glances exchanged by those closest to him. He recalled the moment he first glimpsed the truth hidden beneath the Emperor's facade, the realization that the immortal throne upon which his father sat was a prison as much as a crown. The Emperor, godlike in power, yet bound by an unseen cage of purpose and sacrifice. Was Horus destined to be the instrument of liberation or destruction? The duality tore at his soul. In the silence, a message arrived, a secret communique encrypted with forbidden codes. The sender, a figure veiled in shadow, a rival within the Imperium who sought to manipulate the course of destiny. The message spoke of ancient technologies lost to time, of biotransference and resurrection protocols that could alter the very nature of life and death. A power that could tip the scales of the coming war. Horus's hand trembled as he considered the implications. To wield such power was to defy the natural order, and yet, in a galaxy consumed by endless war, was not survival itself a rebellion against fate? The night deepened, stars outside flickering like distant beacons of hope or omens of despair. Horus's journey hurtled forward, propelled by choices that blurred the line between hero and traitor, savior and destroyer. The galaxy held its breath. The halls of the vengeful spirit were silent but alive with unseen currents, as if the very ship itself sensed the storm gathering around its master. Horus sat alone in his private sanctum, the glow of the hololith casting eerie patterns on walls adorned with relics of forgotten wars. Outside, the stars spun their endless dance, indifferent to the fragile empire perched precariously upon their edge. His thoughts circled back to the message, the veiled promise of resurrection protocols and biotransference, whispers of a power that could bend mortality itself. in a universe ruled by death and decay. Such knowledge was a temptation few could resist. Yet Horus felt the weight of the choice pressing down upon him, to grasp at forbidden power or to accept the slow decay of all things mortal. A sudden knock shattered the stillness. The door hissed open to reveal Loken, his expression grave but loyal. "War Master, the council awaits. There are matters that cannot wait." Rising, Horus donned his helm, its ceramite plating cold against his skin. As he walked through the corridors, memories flickered, of battles won and lost, of brothers who fought beside him and those who now whispered behind closed doors. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and the certainty he once held dissolved into shadows. The council chamber was a crucible of tensions, where primarchs and advisors gathered beneath banners that bore the scars of 1,000 campaigns. Among them, Angron's furious glare clashed with the calm wisdom of Rogel Dawn. Alliances formed and fractured in whispers, and Horus's presence was both a balm and a blade. As the debate unfolded, strategies for quelling rebellion, discussions of loyalty and sacrifice, Horus felt the silent judgments, the unspoken questions. Was he the savior they believed in, or a harbinger of ruin? His heart, burdened by the secrets he now carried, weighed heavy. Erebus's words echoed in his mind, a siren call to challenge the Emperor's vision, to seize destiny by the throat. Horus understood that the path he chose would ripple through the galaxy, breaking chains or forging new ones. In the shadows of the council, a figure watched, Malfigor, a whispered name among the word-bearers, whose loyalty was as enigmatic as the warp itself. His eyes burned with fervor, a mirror to the darkness gathering within Horus's soul. As the meeting adjourned, Horus lingered, torn between the bonds of brotherhood and the seduction of power. The Empire's fate balanced precariously on the edge of his resolve, and the shadows around him thickened. In the stillness before dawn, Horus faced the ultimate question: to embrace the light of the Emperor, or to walk into the consuming night. The stars above seemed to tremble, as if aware of the choice that would shape the destiny of all mankind. The oppressive silence of the vengeful spirit was broken only by the distant thrum of the ship's engines, a constant reminder of the endless void surrounding them. Horus stood at the observation deck, staring out into the abyss where countless stars blinked like the eyes of forgotten gods. The galaxy, so vast and cold, seemed to whisper secrets in a language older than time itself, secrets that promised both salvation and oblivion. Beside him, Erebus's voice was low, a serpent's whisper curling through the air. "You cannot deny what stirs within you, Horus. The Emperor's vision is but a cage, golden, yes, but no less binding. True freedom lies in breaking those chains, even if it means shattering the stars themselves." Horus's hand clenched the railing. The words echoed the turmoil that had gripped his heart since that first spark of doubt. His immortality, once a gift, now felt like a curse. To live through millennia, watching worlds fall and brothers betray, was to carry a loneliness that no legion could fill. He thought of the mortals, fragile and fleeting, who looked to him as a beacon of hope. Yet how could he lead them if his own soul was fractured? The biotransference rites whispered in forbidden texts promised a way to transcend flesh and fate, to become something beyond the reach of decay. But at what cost? A sudden alert interrupted the reverie. A distress signal from the agri-world of Helios Prime, deep in rebellion. Colonists cried for salvation from heretical insurgents, their voices a tapestry of desperation and faith. Horus's gaze hardened. This was not just a battle for territory, but a test of conviction. He summoned Captain Loken, whose unwavering loyalty was a rare balm to his fractured spirit. Prepare the legion. We march at dawn. Helios Prime will not fall to the darkness. As preparations began, Horus found himself torn between duty and the growing shadows within. His second-in-command moved with purpose, yet Horus knew the true war was not on the battlefield, but within his own heart. In the quiet moments before battle, memories of his father, the Emperor, flickered like distant stars, majestic, unyielding, but distant. Was the Emperor's path the only way forward, or was rebellion the harsh truth humanity needed? The vengeful spirit's engines roared to life, carrying Horus and his legion into the fray. The galaxy held its breath once more, as the line between salvation and damnation blurred beneath the cold light of distant suns. The battle for Helios Prime unfolded beneath a blood-red sky, a brutal cacophony of fire and steel that shook the very ground. Legionnaires, clad in armor etched with the proud sigils of Horus's command, moved as one, an unyielding tide against the insurgents who sought to tear the world from the Imperium's grasp. Explosions painted the horizon with fire, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning promethium. Amid the chaos, Horus stood at the forefront, a figure both majestic and tragic. His presence inspired his warriors, yet his mind wrestled with the growing schism inside him. Every fallen enemy was a victory, but also a reminder of the cost. Lives extinguished, worlds scarred, and the relentless march of war that showed no mercy. In the heat of battle, he caught sight of Captain Loken, fighting fiercely, his loyalty a beacon amid the storm. But even Loken's unwavering faith could not pierce the shadows that gathered in Horus's soul. The whispered promises of forbidden power, the subtle manipulations of Erebus, and the cold calculus of empire weighed heavily. As the insurgents fell back, defeated but unbroken, Horus received word of a disturbing revelation. A secret council had convened in the Emperor's absence, plotting to undermine his authority. The betrayal cut deep, a wound that bled doubt and fury. Returning to his chambers, Horus confronted Erebus beneath the cold light of distant stars. They conspire against me. The very empire I fight to protect turns its blade in the dark. Erebus smiled, a shadow playing across his face. The chains you wear are forged not just by the Emperor, but by those who fear your power. It is time to break free, Horus, to seize destiny, not as a servant, but as a master. The words echoed in the silence, heavy with promise and peril. Horus knew the path ahead was fraught with darkness, yet the allure of freedom from the Emperor's shadow was a siren call too powerful to ignore. In the quiet aftermath of battle, as Helios Prime smoldered beneath the scarred sky, Horus's heart hardened. The war was no longer only against external enemies, but against those who wielded loyalty as a weapon, and against the part of himself still shackled by doubt. The galaxy's fate teetered on the edge, and the choices of one man would soon cast long shadows over all. The fires of Helios Prime still burned in the distance, a blazing testament to victory stained with the ash of sacrifice. But aboard the vengeful spirit, a different kind of battle raged, one of whispered treachery, fragile alliances, and the slow erosion of trust. The once unbreakable bonds between Horus and his brothers now trembled beneath the weight of secrets and unspoken fears. Among the Primarchs gathered in the war chamber, tension simmered like a storm held at bay. Rogel Dawn, steadfast and unyielding, cast a wary eye upon Horus, sensing the darkness gathering within. The Imperium cannot afford division, Dawn warned, his voice a low growl. We stand on the edge of oblivion, and your doubts threaten to tip us into chaos. But Horus's gaze was distant, haunted by visions of betrayal and the crushing burden of immortality. Loyalty is not enough, replied, voice heavy with regret. We are shackled by the Emperor's will, but the future demands more than obedience. It demands freedom, even if it is paid for in blood. Whispers echoed through the chamber as Malcador the Sigillite stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a sorrow born of centuries. Beware the path you tread, Horus. The power you seek comes at a price few can pay, and fewer still survive. Erebus watched from the shadows, a smile curling beneath his grim visage. He had planted the seeds, but the harvest was yet to come. The galaxy outside churned with unrest. Systems once loyal now bristled with rebellion, fueled by rumors of the War Master's wavering allegiance. The warp writhed, feeding on the turmoil, its malevolent tendrils creeping ever closer to the material realm. In a private chamber, Horus grappled with the deepest fracture within, his own reflection staring back with eyes full of regret and ambition. The immortality that had once seemed a gift now felt like a curse, a chain that bound him to an endless cycle of loss. Memories surged forth, friends lost to betrayal, worlds sacrificed in the name of order, and the crushing realization that the man he once was might never return. As the stars outside flickered with a cold light, Horus made a choice. The time for hesitation was over. The Empire would either be reborn in fire or fall into shadow. The die was cast. The air aboard the vengeful spirit grew heavy with portent as Horus descended into the depths of his fortress, the labyrinthine chambers beneath the command deck, where secrets whispered in the dark. Here, surrounded by relics of a forgotten age and arcane machinery humming with eldritch energy, the War Master confronted the crossroads of fate and ambition. Erebus awaited him, the flicker of the warp's cruel light dancing in his eyes. The Emperor's grasp tightens even now, he intoned, voice thick with zeal. But the path of true power lies not in servitude, but in rebellion. Together, we shall tear the chains that bind us. Horus's gaze hardened. The words resonated with the storm within, a tempest of doubt and desire that threatened to consume all. The secrets of biotransference and resurrection protocols whispered promises of defying death itself, beckoned like a siren's call from the abyss. Yet, beneath the surface, another conflict brewed, a desperate yearning for the brotherhood that had once defined him. Memories of loyal companions like Loken, steadfast and unyielding, stirred a pang of sorrow amid the growing darkness. The galaxy outside convulsed with unrest. Worlds burned in rebellion. The Imperium's grip faltered as whispers of treachery spread like wildfire. The warp, ever hungry, fed upon the chaos, its tendrils reaching for the very soul of mankind. In a moment suspended between hope and despair, Horus made his choice. The path ahead would be forged in blood and betrayal, sacrifice and shattered dreams. He would embrace the darkness, not as a monster, but as a fallen son seeking salvation in the shadow of the throne. The stars above bore silent witness as the War Master's fate sealed itself in fire. The void beyond the vengeful spirit seemed to pulse with restless shadows, as if the very fabric of the galaxy shuddered beneath the weight of an impending reckoning. Horus stood atop the command dais, his eyes reflecting the cold light of distant suns. Light that now seemed colder, more distant than ever before. The tides of war had shifted, and with them, the fragile alliances that had held the Imperium together began to fracture like ancient stone. Within the War Council, voices clashed, some pleading for unity, others whispering of rebellion. Horus's own brothers, once bound by blood and purpose, now regarded him with suspicion and fear. The line between friend and foe blurred, and betrayal lurked in every shadowed glance. Captain Loken confronted him in the dim corridors, his voice edged with both loyalty and despair. "Warmaster, what path do you choose? Will you stand with the Emperor, or tear the Imperium asunder?" Horus's response was a bitter smile, his heart torn between duty and desire. "The path I walk is mine alone. It is the only way to save what remains." But even as he spoke, secrets surfaced, whispers of forbidden technologies and dark pacts made in the name of survival. Erebus revealed a hidden chamber within the ship, a sanctum where ancient rituals and the mysteries of biotransference were practiced in shadow. There, Horus embraced the darkness fully, undergoing rites that bound his soul ever deeper to powers beyond mortal ken. The cost was high, a sacrifice of innocence, of trust, and of the fragile humanity that lingered within. The stars above seemed to dim in mourning as the War Master's transformation sealed the fate of the Imperium. The Empire's heart beat slower now, its bloodline twisted by ambition and despair. And as the first echoes of rebellion rang out across the void, Horus prepared to unleash a storm that would forever alter the galaxy's destiny. The air in the throne room of the vengeful spirit hung thick with tension, as if the very walls absorbed the heavy silence before the storm. Horus stood before the gathered Primarchs and commanders, faces etched with resolve, fear, and fractured loyalty. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the reckoning that would decide the fate of all mankind. The revelation of Horus's pact with the dark forces of the warp shattered the fragile unity that had bound the legions together. Words turned to accusations, and old alliances crumbled beneath the weight of betrayal. Rogel Dawn's unwavering gaze met Horus's with quiet sorrow. "You have forsaken us all, brother." Horus's voice was steady, but beneath it lurked the tempest of a man consumed by doubt and conviction. "I have chosen a path beyond the Emperor's reach, one that will bring true freedom to humanity, even if it costs us everything." The battle lines were drawn, not just across star systems, but within hearts and minds. Friends became foes, brothers became enemies. The Empire fractured, and war ignited from within. Amid the chaos, Horus's thoughts drifted to Captain Loken, loyal and unyielding, whose faith was now a beacon of defiance against the darkness. Their final confrontation was inevitable, a clash not only of swords, but of souls. As the legions prepared for the cataclysmic civil war to come, Horus stood alone at the precipice, the weight of immortality pressing down like a crown of thorns. The stars above flickered, mourning the loss of light that once promised salvation. The age of brotherhood was ending. The storm of civil war tore through the galaxy like a ravenous beast, consuming worlds and tearing families asunder. The legions, once united beneath the banner of the Emperor, now clashed in brutal combat. Brothers fighting brothers, their bonds shattered by betrayal and ambition. The skies above battlefields burned with fire and death, the echoes of cannonades a grim symphony to the collapse of an empire. Horus led the traitor legions with a ferocity born of conviction and despair. Each victory was stained with sacrifice, each conquest a reminder of what had been lost. Yet, beneath the armor and the fury, the War Master's heart wrestled with ghosts, memories of loyalty, of friendships broken, and the price of his rebellion. Captain Garviel Loken, steadfast and unwavering, became a symbol of resistance, a thorn in Horus's side, and a mirror to the man he once was. Their encounters were more than battles of steel. They were clashes of ideals, of fractured souls seeking meaning amid chaos. In the depths of the warp, the forces that empowered Horus whispered promises of dominion, yet exacted a terrible toll. The ritualistic rites and resurrection protocols twisted flesh and mind, forging warriors more machine than man, yet eroding what little humanity remained. Amid the carnage, Horus found moments of bitter clarity, reflections on the cost of immortality, the loneliness it bred, and the fading hope that his path might yet lead to redemption. But the abyss was wide, and the light dim. As the galaxy burned, the bonds of brotherhood lay in ashes, and the fate of mankind teetered on a knife's edge. The air above the Imperial Palace was a furnace of fire and smoke. The siege of terror had reached its most desperate and decisive phase. The outer walls had already fallen in places, and the traitor forces of Horus now pressed against the inner sanctums, their numbers swelling like an unending tide of corruption. The sky was choked with ash, where once the golden light of the Astronomicon had shone. Now, thunderhawks screamed through the smoke, titans strode across broken avenues, and the thunder of artillery became the heartbeat of the dying city. The Eternity Gate, the most sacred entrance to the Sanctum Imperialis, stood as the final bastion of the Loyalists. Massive adamantium doors, engraved with the victories of the Emperor, loomed behind walls studded with defense turrets, macro batteries, and the finest fortifications humanity had ever constructed. It was here that Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fis, had taken personal command. The gate was more than a wall. It was a shrine, a symbol, and if it fell, the very heart of the Imperium would be torn open. Traitor titans advanced in the distance, their hellish silhouettes framed by burning spires. The Legio Mortis, the Death's Heads, marched alongside the Iron Warriors, their corrupted war machines pounding the palace walls with weapons that could level entire cities. The ground shook with every impact. The air stank of ozone and demon ichor. Legions of traitor Astartes pressed forward, world eaters howling in frenzied madness, emperor's children reveling in the slaughter, and the relentless Death Guard advancing behind waves of toxic gas. The sons of Horus themselves led the vanguard, their sea-green armor dulled by ash, but still gleaming with the arrogance of their master. Behind them, ranks of heretic militia surged forward, whipped into a frenzy by the dark gods. From the walls, the defenders answered with unrelenting fire. The Imperial Fist manned the ramparts with the discipline only Dawn's sons could muster, their bolters roaring in measured volleys. The Blood Angels fought alongside them, their crimson armor glinting in the dim light, the artistry of their combat unmatched. Custodians in golden plate moved like avatars of war, each blow from their guardian spears felling multiple foes. The Sisters of Silence stood in grim silence, their psychic null ablade against the warp-spawned horrors that emerged from the chaos lines. The battle became a storm of flesh and metal. Assault after assault crashed against the walls, each one breaking against the unyielding will of the defenders. But the enemy's numbers were unending, and their corruption spread with every moment. Warp breaches opened amidst the no-man's land, spilling demons into the fight, screeching bloodletters, hulking plague-bearers, and nightmarish warp beasts whose forms defied reason. At the gate itself, the fighting reached an apocalyptic scale. The traitors unleashed the full fury of their arsenal, battering rams the size of hab-blocks, melter charges that boiled stone and steel, and sorcerous storms conjured by the word-bearers. One blast ripped apart an entire section of the wall, hurling defenders into the sky in a cloud of gore. Dawn himself was there, rallying his warriors, his voice a command that could not be ignored, even in the chaos of the siege. The Blood Angel's Primarch, Sanguinius, fought at Dawn's side, his wings blackened with soot, his blade blazing with righteous fury. Together, they led counterattacks that pushed the traitors back from the gate, even as the dead piled high in the killing fields. Every inch of ground was paid for in blood. The defenders knew they were buying time, not for themselves, but for the Emperor, deep within the palace, preparing for the final confrontation. The air was so thick with smoke and dust that visibility was measured in meters. Vox traffic was a constant stream of orders, desperate calls for reinforcements, and the screams of the dying. Ammunition was running low. Medicae units worked in hastily fortified aid stations, the wounded crying out even as shells burst around them. But still, the line held. Then came the moment the defenders feared. From the darkness emerged Abaddon the Despoiler, first captain of the Sons of Horus, leading the Justarian Terminators in a spearhead assault. Their cataphracti armor was near impenetrable, their weapons tearing through Imperial lines like scythes through grain. The walls trembled under their assault, and the fighting at the gate reached a frenzy unmatched in the siege thus far. Rogel Dawn met Abaddon in the maelstrom, their clash shaking the very stones of the palace. Around them, warriors fell in droves, the clash of bolter fire and the roar of chainswords echoing like the drums of apocalypse. Sanguinius darted in to intercept demonic reinforcements, his sword cutting through the unnatural flesh of a greater demon that sought to break the gate in a single blow. The hours stretched into eternity. Neither side yielded. The defenders fought with the desperation of those who knew the fate of the galaxy hung on their survival. The traitors fought with the zeal of those promised the favor of the gods. The walls bled, the ground drank deep of blood, and the air was alive with the cries of the dying. By nightfall, the traitors had been driven back from the gate, for now, but the cost had been staggering. Thousands of loyal warriors lay dead, the defenses were weakened, and in the distance, the traitors gathered for yet another assault. The siege of the Eternity Gate was not over. It had only begun. And in the deepest shadows of the battlefield, unseen by most, the agents of chaos whispered their plans. The next attack would not simply aim to break the walls. It would aim to break the spirit of the defenders. The Imperium's eastern borders have always been plagued by dangers both ancient and new. But in the late 41st millennium, one rising power began to truly test the resolve of the Emperor's domain, the Tau Empire. Young, technologically advanced, and driven by a unifying doctrine they called the Greater Good, the Tau had expanded rapidly across the eastern fringe. For centuries, the Imperium dismissed them as an insignificant xenospecies, barely worthy of notice. That arrogance ended when Imperial reconnaissance fleets returned with reports of entire systems swearing allegiance to the Tau without a single battle being fought, seduced by promises of peace, prosperity, and unity. By 742 M41, the situation had grown too serious to ignore. Segmentum Command authorized a full-scale crusade to halt the Tau expansion. The Damocles Gulf Crusade was born, named for the yawning expanse of unstable warp storms that separated Imperial space from the heart of the Tau Empire. Imperial strategists saw it as a chance to deliver a crushing blow before the alien power could fully mature. In truth, they underestimated not only the Tau's military capabilities, but also their mastery of diplomacy and logistics. The Crusade fleet was a massive undertaking. Dozens of Imperial Guard regiments, Astartes chapters, and Navy battle groups gathered for the assault. Among the most prominent Space Marine forces were the White Scars, skilled in rapid assaults and lightning raids, and the Raven Guard, masters of stealth and sabotage. The Imperial Guard was represented by storied regiments like the Cadian Shock Troopers, Valhallan Ice Warriors, and the savage Catachan Jungle Fighters. It was an army designed to break the back of the Tau Empire. The campaign began with a brutal push across the Gulf, as the Imperial fleet battled through scattered Tau patrols and automated defense satellites. The Tau responded with an unfamiliar style of warfare. Precise, long-range engagements designed to keep the enemy at arm's length. Where the Imperium favored overwhelming frontal assaults, the Tau fought like hunters, striking from afar, using battle suits, skimmer tanks, and devastating railgun fire to harry and weaken their foes before committing to decisive strikes. Every Imperial victory came at a higher cost than expected. The early months of the Crusade saw Imperial forces reclaiming several worlds that had joined the Tau. Yet even on these victories, commanders found a troubling pattern. The local populations were often reluctant to resist the aliens, and in many cases, actively resented the Imperium's return. The Tau had invested in infrastructure, trade, and medical care, winning hearts and minds with tangible improvements to daily life. Against such tactics, the Imperium's usual methods of fear and control seemed clumsy. It was a war not just for territory, but for loyalty. The Tau's military centerpiece was the Firecast, led by the enigmatic commander Shadowson. A brilliant tactician trained in both conventional and asymmetric warfare, she consistently denied the Imperium the decisive battle it craved. Instead, her forces would vanish into the void, only to reappear elsewhere, striking at vulnerable supply lines or isolated garrisons. Alongside her was Commander Farsight, a bold and aggressive leader whose daring raids caused havoc in Imperial rear lines. Though their methods differed, both commanders shared an uncanny ability to predict Imperial movements, a testament to the Tau's advanced reconnaissance and coordination. The turning point came at the battle for Dalith. The Imperium had massed an overwhelming force to crush the Tau presence on the planet, believing that a decisive ground engagement would shatter their will to resist. But when the drop came, Imperial forces found themselves under a withering rain of railgun and missile fire, guided by spotter drones and supported by air superiority. Tau battlesuits darted between cover, targeting officers and heavy weapons teams, while skimmer-mounted hammerhead gunships tore through tank columns. The Imperium pressed forward with sheer determination, the White Scars leading a lightning assault to breach enemy lines. For a brief moment, it seemed the day might be won. Then the Tau counterattack began. Coordinated strikes by crisis suit teams and mobile infantry drove wedges into the Imperial formations, cutting them off from one another. Entire Guard regiments were forced into desperate last stands. The Raven Guard attempted deep strike operations behind Tau lines, but found their landing zones already compromised by Tau predictive targeting. What should have been an Imperial triumph became a costly stalemate. By the battle's end, both sides had suffered severe losses, and neither could claim a clear victory. As the campaign dragged on, the Imperium's supply lines grew increasingly strained. Warp storms across the Damocles Gulf intensified, cutting off reinforcements and delaying vital shipments of ammunition, fuel, and food. The Tau, operating much closer to their core territories, were able to sustain a war of attrition more effectively. Moreover, they continued to win over local populations, turning Imperial occupation into a constant security challenge. By 742 M41's end, Segmentum Command made the difficult decision to call off the crusade. The official reports cited the worsening warp conditions as the reason for withdrawal, but among veterans of the campaign, there was a grim understanding that the Imperium had met a foe it could not easily crush. The retreat was orderly, but bitter. Worlds bled for by the Guard and the Astartes were abandoned to the Toe's influence. For the Toe, the Damocles Gulf Crusade was both a trial and a triumph. They had survived the wrath of the Imperium, proving that their greater good could withstand the galaxy's harshest realities. For the Imperium, it was a sobering reminder that not all enemies could be subdued by bolter and blade alone. Though the crusade ended, both sides knew that their conflict was far from over. The Damocles Gulf remained a contested frontier, a wound in the galaxy that would bleed anew in centuries to come. And far away, in the shadows of the Toe Empire, Commander Farsight was beginning to question whether the greater good truly served all, or whether the Toe's unity concealed cracks that the Imperium had yet to exploit. His doubts would one day fracture the Toe's destiny. The weeks after the failed attempt on Malekith's life were marked by a strange and heavy stillness. The Drushi were quiet, too quiet. It was as if the entire nation of Naggaroth was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable storm to break. But those who knew Malekith understood that the silence was not born of fear or indecision. It was the calm before a meticulously orchestrated strike. Rumours swirled through the courts of Naggarond. Some claimed that the Witch King had retreated into deep council with Marathi, his mother, and the cabals of sorceresses from Grond. Others whispered that he was forging new pacts with dark powers, calling on entities from the realm of chaos itself. The truth, as always, was far more dangerous than speculation. Malekith's private war council met in the Tower of Oblivion, a place forbidden to all but his most trusted lieutenants. There, under the cold light of enchanted braziers, maps of Ultuan were spread across obsidian tables. Red marks cut across the Asa territories, denoting targets, while black runes were etched beside certain locations, sites of power, ley line nexuses, and ancient shrines that could tip the balance of the coming war. Malekith spoke little, but when he did, his words were edged with the certainty of a ruler who believed himself chosen by destiny. The Phoenix King still clings to his illusions of peace, he said, his voice low but carrying through the chamber. We will strip him of those illusions. Every harbour will burn, every tower will fall. Ultuan will drown in its own blood before I am finished. Helebron, the Hag Queen, stood beside him, her presence as chilling as the winter winds. The brides of Cain are ready, she said, her voice dripping with bloodlust. The seas will run red before the year ends. Lokia Fellheart, the scourge of the seas, leaned forward with a cruel smile. My fleets wait only for your command. The corsairs grow restless. Let us hunt. Even among such ruthless company, there was a shared understanding that this campaign would be unlike any before. Malekith was not preparing for another raid, or even a series of battles. This was war on a scale that would shake the foundations of the world. Far to the east, in the cursed city of Harganeth, executioners sharpened their blades in preparation for the sacrifices to come. In Karond Kar, beasts from the frozen wastes were captured and broken for war. The forges of Hagreif worked without pause, crafting weapons imbued with dark magic. Every city, every outpost, every warband of the Drushi was preparing for the Witch King's call. And yet, Malekith was not blind to the dangers. He knew that the Asur would rally under Finubar, their Phoenix King, and that Tyrion, Ulthuan's greatest champion, would lead its armies. The Druchi could not hope to win through brute force alone. They would need guile, treachery, and the favour of powers that no mortal should dare to bargain with. It was for that reason that Malekith summoned Morathi in secret. The meeting took place in the Chamber of Veils, deep within Naggarond, where reality itself seemed to twist and waver. Morathi arrived draped in shimmering silks, her beauty as unnatural as it was lethal. Her eyes gleamed with amusement as she regarded her son. "You have need of me, my Witch King?" she asked, her voice soft and mocking. "I have need of your talents," Malekith replied, his tone carefully measured. "The Azur are strong in magic, but their defenses are predictable. I want their strength turned against them. I want their spells to falter, their wards to collapse. I want their mages to fear the power they wield." Morathi smiled, a slow and knowing smile. "Then you ask for a curse that will span the seas. Such magic requires a price." "I will pay it," Malekith said without hesitation. "In blood, in souls, whatever is required." Her laughter was low and dark. "Oh, my son, you will pay it in ways you cannot yet imagine. But very well, I will weave your curse." In the nights that followed, strange lights danced in the skies above Naggarond. Ships vanished into the mist, only to reappear days later with crews who spoke in tongues and clawed at their own eyes. The chill in the air deepened, and the shadows seemed to move with a will of their own. The Druchi did not question it. They knew that the preparations for war were nearly complete. The first strike came not from the armies of Naggaroth, but from the sea. Felhart's fleet swept through the western waters of Ulthuan, raiding coastal villages and leaving only ash and corpses in their wake. The Phoenix King's messengers rode hard to rally the defences, but Malekith had timed his moves to perfection. Even as the Asur moved to repel the Corsairs, word came of assaults on their eastern shores. Confusion spread through their ranks. From his throne in Naggarond, Malekith watched the reports with cold satisfaction. The storm he had promised was no longer gathering. It had broken, and it would not end until Ulthuan lay in ruin. But just as victory seemed certain, an unexpected message arrived. A fleet of the High Elves had slipped past his patrols, carrying something dangerous. The reports were unclear, but one word appeared again and again: dragon. The galaxy lay silent in the aftermath of the Terran Crusade. The warp storms that had raged for centuries began to weaken, their furious tides ebbing as if the universe itself took a weary breath. Yet even in this fleeting calm, the Imperium was not at peace. It never could be. The Emperor, though still bound to the Golden Throne, radiated a renewed psychic presence across the Astronomicon. His light was stronger now than it had been for millennia, a blazing signal to every loyal servant of the Imperium. But the cost of the recent wars was evident everywhere. Sectors reduced to ash, Forge worlds stripped of resources, and countless chapters of the Adeptus Astartes fighting at barely a fraction of their former strength. The surviving Primarchs stood divided. Guilliman, ever the reformer, sought to rebuild the Imperium into something more efficient, more adaptable. Lion L. Johnson, returned from the shadows, called for vigilance against the encroaching forces of Chaos and Xenos alike. Others, less visible but no less influential, plotted their own paths, weighing loyalty against ambition. Across the Eye of Terror, the ruinous powers seethed. The failures of Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade had weakened his position among the traitor legions, but the War Master of Chaos was nothing if not persistent. In the deepest pits of the warp, the dark gods whispered their next moves, each scheme more insidious than the last. The orcs, ever drawn to the scent of war, rallied under a rising warlord whose wah threatened to sweep across the eastern fringe. The Tyranids, though slowed by the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon, continued to adapt and evolve, their hive fleet splitting into new and unpredictable patterns. Even the Necrons, long content to reclaim their tomb worlds in silence, stirred with greater urgency as the galaxy's balance shifted. In the far reaches of Ultima Segmentum, an anomaly appeared, neither fully warped nor real space. It pulsed with an energy unknown to any race, drawing the attention of inquisitors, xenoseers, and chaos prophets alike. Some whispered that it was a weapon from the war in heaven, others that it was the birth of a god. No one could say for certain, but all agreed it would change the fate of the galaxy. On Terra, the halls of the Imperial Palace bustled with unusual activity. Guilliman convened a council unlike any before it. Astartes, Inquisitors, Tech Priests, and even sanctioned psychers all stood together. The agenda was clear. The Imperium could no longer survive as it had for 10,000 years. It needed something new. Whether this something was salvation or damnation remained to be seen. Even as these plans were set in motion, the shadows lengthened. Assassins of the Officio Assassinorum whispered of strange targets, beings who did not exist in any database, yet were known to have influenced the course of wars. The Adeptus Mechanicus reported fragmentary data of an artificial intelligence that predated the dark age of technology, hidden somewhere in the uncharted galactic rim. In the silent chambers beneath the Golden Throne, the Emperor's custodians heard a sound not heard in millennia. A faint, deliberate tapping from within the throne's mechanisms. Some said it was nothing more than the machinery settling. Others feared it was a message. Warhammer 40,000 had never been a galaxy of peace, and now, with the wounds of the Terran Crusade still fresh, every faction sharpened its blades once more. The Emperor's light burned brighter than ever, but so too did the fires of ambition, heresy, and vengeance. The galaxy was not healing. It was bracing itself. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.